The AI stuff kicked off a thought experiment about the slow decline of needing to have skills. At what point in the not-so-distant future is being able to know how to drive a vehicle going to be a lost skill?
These skills are disappearing. I don't always know the implications of them.
People can now make content based upon going to things. They can get like a social currency and a status boost by going to a thing.
But if they're not doing that, then what are they doing? Are they just playing video games? Are they just watching more content? And at a point, you have to do the totally irrational thing and decide to do something that you actually don't have to do.
Hey, welcome to the Create Unknown, the home of Make Something Mean Something. It is TCU's Day. I am Kevin Lieber, and with me as always is Matthew Tabor.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the death of skills, which it's not obvious what that means by the title alone, but can we establish now, are we going to passively witness the death, or are we actually going to kill something today? That's what I want to know. Are we actively killing? Are we murdering? Or are we just being a witness?
No. I think that we are innocent bystanders. We are just casually observing, but, we are part of the death of skills for sure. This is something that I have been thinking about recently because of the AI stuff, but
okay,
the AI stuff sort of was like a catalyst for this thought. But once I started on this train, it just kept rolling, and I kept rolling and rolling and rolling, and I was like, this seems like, well, the AI is certainly a watershed moment for this, but perhaps the death of skills is a long time coming.
Well, I'm interested in this because this is one of those topics where I have an extremely vague notion of what you mean, but it's not like we've talked about it and planned out the bullet points that we want to hit. So this is definitely fresh to us talking about the topic. Last week we talked about something that we'd talked about for like 10 years, and this is something that we haven't talked about ever. So, I like these where we figure it out as we do it in real time.
Yeah. It'll be a little bit of a high wire act, but we haven't talked about it for 10 years because it's just a new thing that I had noticed when people started talking about how AI is going to wipe out a whole bunch of creative jobs. And this is coming up because of the writer's strike. There's a lot of talk about how, we'll just have AI writers. And obviously this goes back, this conversation or this idea goes back to our last conversation, I think, with Psychic Pebbles, who was just a little bit more than prescient when it comes to the idea that AI might be able to figure out how to do creative endeavors. But I don't know if you've heard, for instance, any of the AI generated music that's come up. I don't know how that exactly works, but it'll be like a Drake and The Weeknd mashup new song, and AI just goes beep, bop, boop, bop, boop, and it cranks out the song that is indistinguishable.
It's faithful to both of them. Then okay.
I mean, perhaps more discerning ears can tell the difference, but to my uneducated oral palate, when it comes to Drake and The Weeknd, it sounded like if that was just a real song that they produced, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, and I mean, let's say it was somebody who could. Well, you just keep running it, don't you? Let's say you pump out 500, probably one of them would be a reasonable mix of the two, right? And there's no, what is that? Sitting there and hitting reload all day? It's not like it takes time or resources or money. So yeah, even if it has a very low success rate, the investment into doing it is nothing at all. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure that would get better over time, but but that's kind of bizarre. I mean, that's a strange thing to think, is that like, are we going to get a brand new Beatles song tomorrow?
Yeah,
You know?
not tomorrow, but maybe the next day or the next day. I think definitely. I've heard some of the AI generated like new Nirvana songs, and I personally don't like them. I'm like, I would never listen to it. It sounds uncanny valley still. So I guess that is more of my my purview, to be able to tell the difference between that, being kind of weird or not. But the fact is that this train is rolling, and I don't see, I don't think it has to develop that much more for it to be able to crank out a brand new Led Zeppelin song or brand new Queen album. I don't see how that's not coming. And I have read things about how studios now want to purchase the rights to actors' voices and likenesses in perpetuity in order to one day just generate, like, here's a new Rocky, and Sylvester Stallone is young, is 24 years old. That's really that's off topic though. The topic though is the AI stuff kicked off a thought experiment in my head about this kind of trajectory, this slow decline of needing to have skills in order to get by.
Skills like what? Let's start there. What kinds of skills are you talking about?
I guess anything that nowadays might be considered a hobby, like sewing or cooking or baking or playing guitar or drawing, things doing gardening, even maybe, like things that you kind of just don't have to do anymore unless you really want to, unless you really want to go out of your way to be like, I'm going to learn how to crochet. It's like, you don't need to know how to crochet. Like 200 years ago, you had to know how to knit something in order to, we talked about this on a previous podcast. Like you had to know how to hem a shirt or a jacket or something to survive.
Yeah.
Now you just buy a new one, and sort of everything is becoming this, even down to the point of things like planned obsolescence and right to repair, where it's like now farmers can't even fix their tractors because they're designed in such a way where you have to just get rid of it and buy a new one. Like so that lends itself to like, well, then will they know how to fix things eventually if they aren't even allowed to? All of this stuff is piling up into this like Tower of Babel of most people just not having to know how to do anything.
But there has to be people to make things. So that seems like a problem if people are not developing the skills, like the basic skills that they needed in the past or would be useful now or would get them money, like that's a big thing on the clothing stuff. Like you have to do that yourself because it is not financially viable to get a seamstress or a tailor to deal with a thing sometimes, to fix it. Like their time is just worth way too much than, it just, the value calculation doesn't work out. And so that's become irrelevant in a practical sense. But how do you keep making cool things if you don't know how to do anything? And I say anything because from what you described, it sounds like almost every skill is on the table. You mentioned cooking where, yeah, you're right. You could just plain heat up food for the rest of your life and have, if you were smart about it, perfect nutrition. You wouldn't be in bad shape. You'd have decent food that sustained you as you needed to be sustained. You really, truly can get by without any of these things. So my question is, how do you keep making cool things as a group? And also, what do you do with your time? What do you do with your time if you're not like cooking and cleaning? And I don't know. I'm pulling out the lame ones. It's not like I would hate a world in which I didn't ever have to scrub a toilet. Like that would be kind of desirable. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that just adds up. Like, well, what do you do with all this free time? Because it's not learning to knit because you don't need to. So you have more free time and less of an incentive to do anything with it. Isn't that weird?
I think it's becoming really weird. I mean, maybe it's always been weird, and I'm wrong about this, but the art side of it is what makes it weirder, like a lot weirder, because when I see this with music, okay, we had Rick Beato on, and Rick Beato's like, kids do not care about music. They just don't. And one of the things that I had noticed recently is that essentially every popular music genre outside of hip hop or pop has not been relevant for at least a decade. So like rock, like people were talking about the death of rock for a really, really, really long time.
Yeah.
Well, okay. In some ways, it on like a grand scale, it is dead. It did happen. When it comes to,
it's not the standard anymore. It's not the standard of popular music anymore,
and hasn't been. It's not like it's coming back. It's not like, oh, we haven't had like a really breakthrough rock band in a year or two. It's like we haven't had a really breakthrough rock band in like 15 years. I mean, really breakthrough that everybody knows them. A big kind of tell for that problem to me was there's this. I don't know if I've mentioned these guys before. Maybe I just mentioned them in the Discord. I've never mentioned them in the podcast. But there are these brothers, these Australian brothers on YouTube. They have a band called Mixed Up Everything. You can look them up, and they do these phenomenal cover songs. And every single one of their cover songs are songs that are 20, 30 years old. It's all like old Metallica songs, old Tool songs, old Alice in Chains, Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots. Like the most contemporary song I think that they've covered is like Linkin Park, which was that was 20 years ago. It was, so. However, another thing, I have so many thoughts about this topic that I'm sorry that I'm a little scatterbrained, but it sort of helps me allied into what I think is different now that you and I talked about earlier. Is that music right now is seeing a crazy renaissance with fans and festivals and live shows. Like all of a sudden, there's one I think going on right now in Las Vegas, a festival with bands like all of those sort of new metal era, like late 90s, early 2000s bands. I don't know who's on the card, but you think of like System of the Down sort of era. Okay. It's like a whole bunch of those bands, and there are festivals for these bands all the time now. So it seems like in a weird way, those bands are more popular than ever when it comes to performing, but that might just be, this is going to sound like really hyperbolic, but that might just be the death rattle of rock. Like there is this sort of end of days of rock bands happening.
Like a final surge.
Of those sorts of bands, because I don't know who comes along to replace them. Imagine Dragons? I don't think so.
Yeah, no, it's, I wish I had that Rick Beato level knowledge of trends in music like this, because I don't know what gets evolved and what gets replaced. Sometimes things straight up go away.
Yeah,
like you think about rock music having evolved from rhythm and blues and folk and all of these genres combining into a thing that has had about a 75-year run of relevance. And for most of that, almost all of it, it was the standard for popular music globally. But then you think about something like ragtime or big band that came just directly before it. And those are dead. Ragtime and big band did not have an evolution into anything at all. And even when there have been little hints of like little pockets of quirky music. So like, there was the ska era for a while. That is not a direct dominoes falling from any of those genres in the past. That's a different kind of thing. It's not like it was some complex evolution that got to ska. It was just different. So we can look at it and know that it can die. It can be completely and totally gone. And conceptually, it works this way too, where I don't know if anybody listening is familiar with the types of songs that existed in the teens of the 1900s, not the 20 teens. I don't know anything about the 20 teens. I know a lot about the 19 teens, but I may as well have slept through the 20 teens. But if you have, Boss Thread says megaphone crooning. Yes, megaphone crooning is a lost art. But if you have an opportunity to see old sheet music at a garage sale, at a flea market, just look at the songs, and they are so bizarre. So like, I have a ton of it. And I remember this one song called "Who Put the Overalls in Mistress Murphy's Chowder?" Okay. And that's a perfect example of the sheer stupidity of lots of songs of that era. It was just nonsense, total nonsense. And everybody had fun with it. And the lyrics were humorous, and they usually told a story about, some drunk Irishman dumping a pair of dirty overalls in a giant vat of chowder. It's just dumb as hell. Well, that stopped, and when you listen to pop music from the 50s, it's not hardcore serious stuff. They're usually really simple sentiments around romance or fun or whatever, but there's no bullshit about putting overalls in chowder. Mm-hmm. And then as you go further along from that, it actually gets quite serious, and people expect something from lyrics that is meaningful. Even, you mentioned Nirvana. Nirvana was not in the business of writing stupid lyrics. They may not have been the finest poetry in the world, but they all had tremendous meaning behind them.
Some more than others. There are some Hairspray Queen is a pretty stupid song, but I digress. Yeah. Yes, for the most part, the grunge era was pretty dour, serious, sorrowful. Yeah, maudlin.
Right. You just had all these people really trying to say something with their lyrics instead of what's some funny stuff we can say that rhymes and goes along with the beat here, So total nonsense. Even the nonsense that survives is better nonsense. Like Frank Zappa is higher end nonsense than the 1910s nonsense. So even the garbage is significantly better garbage. But yeah, so things do die. And I don't know at this point what is going to live, what is going to stay as it is, what is going to evolve into something new, and what is going to die completely. And I don't know this with music. I don't know this with literature. I really don't know it with movies, because that's not at all what I really focus on. But I don't know with things like the skills you listed. To bring that back to the point here.
I thought of another really important skill. I lost it and I got it back. Driving.
Oh, yeah.
At what point in the not so distant future is being able to know how to drive a vehicle going to be a lost skill?
Yeah, navigation is already almost completely lost. And this is something that my dad could never understand, how I didn't know how to get around. He worked for for Bell Telephone, doing outdoor stuff, so it's not like he was at a switchboard or something. So it meant that he drove around constantly every single day and did this for like 35 years. Well, you're going to know how to get everywhere, and you're going to know every landmark, and you can give directions to people that are, there's going to be a big red barn, and then you go about half a mile and you take a left at this and that. Well, I did not have that kind of experience. And even without coming up on GPS, there was no Garmin, no GoPro. At best, you were printing out MapQuest instructions on a sheet of paper for us. But even, the last 10 or 12 years of relying on GPS, I do not know how to navigate like my parents' generation did in the area that I actually live in. That skill is gone, completely gone. And you're right. The next thing is actually the skill of driving the car, which, that really is avoiding error more than exercising a skill. Like a bad driver versus me as an average driver, if all goes well, we're going to get to the grocery store at exactly the same amount of time. The difference is, the propensity for an accident being greater for the bad driver. So like, that's not so much doing something amazing as doing a lot less of something bad when that one takes over. But these skills are disappearing. I don't always know the implications of them. I don't know if it's I don't think it's probably a big deal not to drive. That's my instinct on that. But it's definitely a liability not to navigate. I feel the value on that because I've been in conversations where I can't, I have no reference for what somebody's saying. I do not have the knowledge to understand them. When I think about all the skills that are going to disappear, I don't know. It's dicey. It's dicey to think what happens when nobody knows how to take food and alter it in such a way that they enjoy consuming it. All they can do is just peel the top off something and take what they get. I don't know. I don't know if it matters or if it doesn't.
I don't know what you've been sipping, but you've got it all wrong. It's time to commit to the Leaf. We've embraced the smoothness and surprising pick-me-up that tea provides. I literally drink it all day long, nearly a gallon a day, and it powers me through research, script writing, and forums on websites that I refuse to name here. But we don't drink normie NPC tea. We drink cultured and refined anime tea from the Dragon's Treasure. Kevin still likes the gunpowder green called Space Cowboy, and I've sampled nearly 40 Dragon's Treasure teas at this point. Lately, I've been slamming black teas like Kentucky Bourbon and liquefied Berserk Despair. Scottish Breakfast is deep and peaty, and I smooth it over with Sebastian's Morning Earl Grey, which has the best vanilla cream taste I think I've ever had in a cup. Give me a pot of that with a hot meatball sub from Sal's Pizza and Brooks Barbecue Chicken to wash down my last meal on death row. I highly recommend the sampler packs. You'll want to try everything just like I did. I literally have not had one tea that I wouldn't be happy to reorder. The Dragon's Wings membership fuels new tea experimentation, and the Tea of the Month Club provides a regularly scheduled surprise. And when you order from the Dragon's Treasure using code CREATE, you'll get 10% off your order. That's 10% off using the code CREATE at thedragonstreasure.com. The link's in the description.
Well, my point is that it doesn't matter. Like, if it mattered, then people wouldn't lose the skill. Like, I think it's getting to a point where all of these things, all of the skills are like sanded down and flattened to a point where unless you are really hyper interested in like learning how to make bread, you'd never need to know how to make bread, which is one of like the most fundamental human foods that we made for however many thousands of years. Now you can just go to a store and there is literally dozens of feet, square feet of any kind of bread imaginable.
Oh yeah.
You could just eat it. And everything is becoming like that is the point of this discussion. So much more so, I think, than we are consciously discussing or talking about, or anyone is noticing. It's like, well, nobody really needs to do any of this stuff, even to stand out. That's like another weird element of this is like, here's another example, like say like playing guitar. Okay. When we were kids, and this is a little bit of like old man talk now, but when we were kids, I mean, everybody that I knew played guitar and was super interested in it. Everyone
tried
was.
to, at least, they had some degree of facility.
Oh my gosh. Like I can't
Gave
think
it a go.
Every single person I was friends with, whether they were a nerd or a jock or a stoner or whatever, they all at some point had a guitar and tried to learn how to play it. Now it's like you have to be just super interested. You have to be hyper interested in guitar and be like, I'm going to learn how to play guitar. But the problem is, who does it matter to other than other people who are really interested in playing guitar? Like if you could just type into an AI prompt any sweet lick imaginable, any sweet rhythm part or guitar solo imaginable, why go through all of that practice, like endless practice? It's a lot of work learning how to play guitar when you could just type into the computer and get a much better result instantly. Unless you really, really, really want to.
Or even use software to generate the sounds. I think we were talking about this in a different context, but instead of using your hands and fingers or mouth, depending on the instrument, to spending years figuring out how to do any of these things well, you can open up a program, and if you can write music, which is not that hard to learn at all, then you can just lay down those notes and move a few sliders and put in a few prompts and get something that sounds like Jimmy Page playing the line you just wrote. And you don't have to go through 15 years of getting quick hands, accurate hands, facile hands.
Here is the point on that, and I think this is a really interesting point. Okay, so if you tried to learn how to play guitar and you recognized how hard it was, you develop an appreciation for someone who's very good at it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So many of these things that will be lost because there won't be this more collective experience of like, yeah, I tried to play guitar. It's actually super hard. Wow, that guy's really good at it, and I understand and appreciate that. If you never tried, then you do not have, you also lose the sort of bragging rights, and awe, like credibility and understanding from other people that you're really good at it. Like they won't even understand that you're any good at it because they have no reference point.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And we're talking about something that's pretty conceptual on this one, but I do want to throw an example out that is absolutely not vague. And that is, texting and apps and all of this stuff for the purposes of dating and romance. They have changed the game quite a lot, and that has eliminated the skill of talking to somebody, meeting somebody, talking to them in real time, and having the result be that both people want to spend more time with each other.
Right.
Whether it's all sorts of ways to do that, I suppose. But people are awkward as hell right now. 90% of the people listening to this podcast would not feel comfortable going into a crowded room of people they don't know and talk to someone who is a potential romantic interest. That skill has not been cultivated in them the way it had to be cultivated for us. And it's not like very many people are amazing at that. Almost everybody is nervous and they're not very good at it, so it's a skill that like kind of nobody's good at, but even that thing that was really hard, forging a personal connection, making friends, it's the same with making friends. There's honestly no difference. It's just, what happens is usually a little different. But that skill is gone, and we know the implications of that we see in, like business articles about the nature of the workplace with 20-somethings. It's a different mood in an office with younger people who are used to communicating on their own terms and in their own time in a very controlled way, that's what happens when you're responding to a text. You get to say exactly what you mean to say and what you want to say when you want to say it. That's awesome. It's an incredible privilege that you don't realize how incredible it is until you are face to face and have to kind of live on your feet. That's a totally different scenario. Well, that skill is gone, and I'm sure people are a lot more comfortable with the distance because they can exercise that control. But we know the cost of not having the skill. We know that. And it's probably not a good thing to be worse at real-time, in-person human interaction. I don't look at that and say that's even neutral. I think that's definitely a negative.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know where the correlation begins, the causation ends, but I mean, we see studies all the time about loneliness being through being through the roof.
Yeah.
And before COVID too. It's like, obviously,
Absolutely.
COVID made things a whole lot worse, but it was,
This is a 10, 12 year
it was
decline.
on the way
Yep.
down way before COVID. That's not to blame for all of that. So
No.
the other thing,
every bit of data we have shows that it predates
yeah,
even a lot of the technology. Like it predates the vast, like the broad use of smartphones. So there was some crossover in the timeline, but now everybody has a phone that's capable of everything, even if it's like the cheapest possible model. Whereas in the past, that 12 years ago, that was not the case. There was kind of the early iPhone, and that was it. And it was happening then. So it was happening with general internet things as opposed to those devices. And we're just starting to see the consequences of that. And I think that we have to think about every one of these skills, whether it's driving, cooking, writing, guitar, and then really think deeply, like consider what that means for the person with the skill, what it means for the people consuming the skill, and what it means for the relevance of that skill. And I think that's different from skill to skill.
definitely. I think I'm really worried about artists, about like illustrators, when it comes to the AI stuff. I think they have been at least the most vocal on the front lines about pushing back against, AI generated art.
Do you think they're the most vulnerable out of all the artistic people?
I think they're the most vulnerable out of all of the hyper talented artistic people. I don't know how to say that in a way that doesn't sound disparaging, I suppose, to others. But to me, like an incredible illustrator or artist is like a magician. It blows me away what they can do and how much work goes into developing that skill and how instantly recognizable someone's talent is over someone else. Like if someone sucks at drawing, everyone knows like really quickly, like this
Right.
sucks. If someone is amazing at it, everyone knows really quickly that is amazing. It's beautiful. It moves you on a very deep level and you're just blown away by it. With the AI
It's
stuff,
identifiable to them. So like on Twitter, for example, when an image comes up, I know it's from Death Ink before I even see the account that it's from, because it's on a level that other people in my feed cannot do. And it's distinctive in so many ways to him and his style.
Right. Which will always exist. There'll always be like a little tunnel that artists can escape through, where if they develop some extremely particular style and they stick to it, no AI is going to outdo that, because the AI has to work off of, what came before it. And I also think that there will always be art is largely a human connection endeavor anyway, because people connect to the artists. So that's why if like Picasso painted something, that was a bunch of squares and circles, and I painted something that was a bunch of squares and circles, no one gives a crap about mine, and Picasso's is worth $300 million, So there will always be that human element to the art that will be important. But I just think it's going to wash out so many people, except for like the hyper end of that, Pareto distribution of people who have like a connection with their audience, when anybody else can just type in Midjourney or whatever and create like unbelievable art and endless varieties of it instantly. I see that as being an avenue that's going to be really, really, really tough, because a lot of people need art too. You need art for all your projects and your whatever it is you're doing, t-shirts and your YouTube banners. And when you can just type in some prompts and get that instead of working with someone, that's a problem for the person who had those skills to begin with.
Yeah, and having a sense and being around other people who do create the art, it helps you do your stuff better, right? So, for example, I primarily write things. I don't edit. I don't have any substantial experience with that. I don't draw and paint. I don't do any of that. So, some of the visual artists, I don't have a sense of that, but I talk to plenty of people who do, and I have an understanding of what they do in a way that helps me do the actually good thing that I do. You know, so like I can write so that a video can be made from that writing. You know what it was like when I started working with you. I did not write so that a video could be made from that writing. And it took an understanding of the visual side from you to know how to do that. So if everybody is getting their skills softened or not pursuing them in the first place, then it even affects the people without those skills, the ones interfacing with those skills and the ones adjacent to that. What I don't understand, though, and actually I want to say something from the episode chat first, because this is important. Jen, who is a fantastic writer, says that a lot of people in her writing groups have talked about AI making them irrelevant. And I mentioned this the other week, that, you know, I ripped on somebody who should be replaced and will not be missed because he stinks. He's not that good. And the fact that he probably gets $75,000 a year for something that, I don't know, Chat GPT or whatever can do, good. Eliminate that value. He can go do something that's actually useful to the world, because writing isn't it. You know, she said that it seems like it's going to hit the mid-tier talents and below. Yeah, there's going to be a call here. There really, truly is. There is going to be a creative call in a lot of different areas. Illustration, writing. I don't know about comedy, because that's such a dicey thing with AI right now. AI is not all that funny because it doesn't know which buttons to push yet. But yeah, those people are going to be gone. So then what do they do? What do they do? What do they do next? Is it a creative thing? Probably not. Because if the thing that they were best at creatively, and you have to assume that if somebody's doing it for a living, that's the creative thing they're best at. If they've just been wiped out there, their number 2 and 3 creative things are probably not viable in this climate. So all you have left are the top tier creatives. And this reminds me of what you were saying at the top about live performances, how people are really enjoying live creative performances, live athletic performances.
Did we get to that yet? I think we just talked about that on before the podcast, because I was going to get to that next. Did I mention that already in the podcast?
I thought you alluded to people enjoying shows. Yeah, wasn't it? With rock music, that there's a surge of the live shows. You mentioned the ones in Vegas.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so you were kind of rubbing up against it.
I rubbed up against it. Yeah. I want to do more than rub up against it, because that was sort of the second half of this discussion has to do, well, okay, it raises the question, if people are becoming, if like skills are becoming, there's one more skill that we have to mention, which is remembering things or really knowing things in general. That also is out the window completely. Gone. I can't even tell you what my wife's phone number is. I don't know it.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I know a single one other than my own.
I don't know my mom's phone number. I don't know my dad's phone number. I just click dad in my phone and it calls him. Like, that's gone.
I only know landlines. I only know the landlines that I've known since the 80s.
Right. So that's a hyper specific example, but you could extend the not needing to know things to almost anything imaginable, because you could just Google it in 15 tenths of a second and forget it just as quickly, because why store that information when it's already been stored outside of your body on servers around the world? So even the concept of like really knowing things and knowing a whole lot about something is really not useful is a skill that's really not useful the way that it once was, where it was incredibly useful prior to, the age of Google. It was invaluable before then. Now, I mean,
it was everything. It was everything to social interaction. because you had to know things to talk about them. Right? You had to know some things and know what you didn't know so you could ask questions. I mean, the whole interactions between people just depended on the knowledge they did or didn't have and their relative differences or commonalities with that knowledge. And now it's like, when you walk around, what does somebody who, let me, I'll rip on Ben because we can always rip on Ben. It's totally fine to rip on Ben. So he's 11, 12 years old. He's walking, around, but yeah, if you don't know a whole lot about the world, what do you do when you run into people? What do you know? Well, you kind of know things you like. You know things about your identity. It's a very passive thing, though. Everything that you know is sort of like how you react to the world, and that's just a completely different thing than 25 years ago, where, man, you would start talking to somebody and know that they were boring as hell because they didn't know anything. They were just extremely dull in an empty vessel. Maybe they lived in such a way that they turned out that way. Maybe they had some limitations. Maybe they were super naive. Who knows? There are a lot of legitimate reasons for not knowing much. But you would run into them and just be like, okay, there's not a lot here. It's not great. It isn't good when you have those encounters. And I think that's where we're headed a little bit, is that skillless, knowledgeless people are just going to be mixing around. And if that's your life, that's who you are. How do you live your life? What do you do and what are you interested in?
We want to help you make something and mean something. And we say that phrase all the time because when you're making something and you know it means something, even if it's just to you, that's when you feel pretty good about what you're creating. The support for the Create Unknown in recent weeks has been incredible. Animators, artists, musicians, YouTubers, aspiring filmmakers, comedians, it is crazy how talented everybody in this community is. Consider joining the Create Unknown Patreon. Every dollar that comes through goes straight into the podcast and its community. That means more highlights videos. It means a big Minecraft project that's on the way. And eventually we'd like to manufacture custom piss bottles so you never have to leave your battle station. And being a patron unlocks participation in all of our live recordings. You've seen the roster of guests we've had. Having access to their minds is a unique opportunity. You can go to patreon.com/thecreateunknown or click the link that's in the description. Every little bit helps and your support means absolutely everything to us. Patreon.com/thecreateunknown, links in the description. We appreciate you, Space Cowboys.
That was the big question that I wanted to raise is, okay, this is all sort of this doom and gloom conversation about an entire society of people who don't know how to do anything particularly well or interesting and don't know any subject particularly well or know about anything interesting. What happens? What's left? And one thing that I think is really interesting that has changed is this colossal rise in-person events and entertainment. And
Can you go into detail about that? Because I didn't actually realize it was happening until you said it. I didn't know that there was a significant difference now compared to 10 years ago. I honestly did not know this.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm weird. I like to read stuff like this. I like economic stuff. So I actually end up reading like a lot of economic stuff about live events and I don't know, whatever. I'm weird. So let me give you some really specific examples. Actually, this is the best example. I thought of it this morning and I was like, this is the example I'm going to use on the podcast. The NBA, the National Basketball Association, the ratings, like the television ratings for watching NBA games are in the toilet. They are not good. The ratings for watching NBA games have gone down, down, down for years now. They are continually crap. But the in-person live tickets are busting records. They are breaking attendance records like every single game all year selling out just garbage NBA games, crap teams. It doesn't matter.
Why?
At
Why
the
is that so
same-
much?
At the same time,
Why?
where no one wants to watch this on TV, everyone are
Yeah.
flocking into the arena. That's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I do find that weird. Why? What sort of thing would I want to see in person that I would have very little to no interest to watch on TV? I don't know if I can come up with one thing that fits that category, but that's what you're describing. That's a really strange phenomenon.
Yeah, a more anecdotal one would be the UFC, where the UFC is in like a really kind of lull right now. And I've seen a lot of people talk about where the fights are just kind of uninteresting. They don't have any big superstars. Conor McGregor hasn't fought for almost 2 years. They're just in a lull as far as hype. Meanwhile, they are just raking in the cash at the box office sales of these live events. No matter where they go, it is
The in-person ones.
Yeah, going in person to see the UFC, a ton of people show up and they pay a lot of money per ticket to do so. So there's something going on, I think, where everyone is just at home, or they work from home, or they don't meet up with people in real life. But then paradoxically, or maybe not paradoxically, maybe it makes sense that people are looking for. But see, I think it's wrong. This is what I wanted to say. And maybe I'm completely wrong about this because I'm just making it up. But I think the first little explanation here, you scratch the little top of the surface and you think, what's like the Occam's razor explanation? And you would say to yourself, well, if people, for instance, say we're tired of being cooped up for years because of the pandemic, or they just in general are tired of, they work from home, so they want to get out of the house and they want an excuse to do that. Maybe that's why they're flocking to these in-person events. Maybe that's a viable explanation. Here's another explanation that's like just a centimeter deeper from that surface level one that I thought of. And that's this. Okay, you ready? People can now make content based upon going to things. They can get like a social currency and a status boost and bragging rights by going to a thing. They can make TikToks. They can do Instagram photos. Here's the hot dog that I got at the Dodger game. LOL.
Yeah.
Going to things becomes now content for your social media. But B, in a world in which skills are diminished and knowledge is diminished, what can replace that is experiences. So maybe having experiences and bragging about them and documenting them and sharing them is the new way for people to differentiate themselves from others.
There's definitely a huge value there that did not exist in the past. Let me tell you what happened 20 years ago when you went to a concert. You bought a t-shirt and went home.
An overpriced
you wore that
t-shirt.
Yeah, you paid $35 for a shirt back when they should have cost $12. And then you wore that shirt until you didn't want to anymore because it wasn't fashionable or you didn't like the band enough or whatever. That's it. You weren't making any content. You weren't showing anybody much of anything. You were a total receptor of those events. And now you don't have to be. You can actually pull all that value you described. I hadn't thought of this. I was so prepared for whatever you were going to say to not hold up. Not because I thought you were going to have a dumb idea, because you were saying that you were thinking of it in real time, and you're like, well, maybe this is me, whatever. So I'm like, okay, this is probably a 50-50 on when we push and pull on it, whether it survives. No. This is 100%. You nailed this. That has to be a massive, massive component. Even if you aren't putting it out for the world to see, you're texting your friends about it. There's something that you can do. Yeah. Wow. That's big. That is really, really big. And you can't do that You can't do that sitting at home watching the thing.
No.
Because I see exactly this on Twitter with baseball people, where there are people who like live in Boston and go to many of the Red Sox games. Some of them I'm sure are season ticket holders, versus the people who just like the Red Sox and tweet about watching them on NESN or MLB TV. And what happens with those two tweets, it is not the same thing. It is the difference between 5 likes and 500 likes. And it can be the shittiest picture in the world from deep in the outfield behind a giant pole, and you can see nothing. And somebody will post that picture of them smiling in that scenario, and a ton of people will respect it. So no, I'm officially endorsing this. This is really a smart thing, and I think that's a question that will have to come up when you think about anything that comes here in the near future. Is what can somebody do on the receiving side to be their own sort of creator on it? And that's something that I immediately thought, well, YouTube has a pretty big problem with this, because you are still a passive receptor for the most part. Yeah, you can leave a comment, whatever, but that's totally different than what you're talking about with having social proof and relevance, and also cool content. Like, it is neat to see the pictures and videos and stuff that people take at a sporting event. Well, you can't do that listening to a song on Spotify, and you can't do that watching a video on YouTube, and you can't do it watching an NBA game on the TV.
Yep.
Oh, I feel like if you had something, it would have to pass this test. Like, if you had an idea, if it passes this test, it's a valid idea, and if it doesn't, it's going to struggle.
Well, I see this as a huge growth opportunity for people, because like the first 3/4 of this conversation was like, well, a lot of this stuff might not be so valuable anymore. It's like, okay, well then I would never want to have that as a podcast discussion without at least floating some sort of alternative that's actionable and useful to people, because that is just depressing. And this is what I think is actionable and useful, and is something to think about, is like, what sort of experiential things can you provide? What can you start? How can you get people to come together so that they are incentivized to do the thing because it benefits them? Whether that is, and it's largely not going to be monetarily, but that doesn't matter. It's social status. It's social currency. It makes them look cool because they were at the thing. I think that, look at all these boxing events that people are doing. You have, you have Creator Clash 1 and 2. You have whatever that thing was with Keemstar and Boogie and
Boogie and Wings of Redemption.
Well, I don't even know what that was. I just saw.
Well, KSI was on the top of the card there, and that's, certainly much more legitimate than most of the most of the YouTuber boxing we see.
Yeah. I know that many alumnus of the TCU are going to be involved in an event this summer that William Osman is putting together with like various makers getting together. That is a way that people are going to more and more, I think, flock towards to stand out, to make money, and use as a, it's like a moth to the flame sort of for people to flock to just show off who they are,
I have, can I drop a theory on you about this?
Yes.
So yours was immediately relevant and an extremely strong analytical reading of something happening right now, which I think is perfectly accurate. Mine is like 6 steps down the line and almost conspiracy level.
Okay.
Yes. So there have not been skill-less times in the past, but there have been times where an individual skill could not be celebrated or consumed at scale. So think about Rome in Caesar's time. If you were a good singer, you were not performing for the multitudes constantly. You just weren't. There were all sorts of reasons that you weren't. Some technological, some you can come up with all these reasons on your own. But there wasn't the same sort of celebrity presence with any skills like that there are now. Doesn't mean the skills weren't there, but that person was, singing in a tavern that night for 20 people. So skills were not celebrated at scale. Now they are. Now any skill, literally any skill, and we've talked about this so many times with YouTube, the craziest skill can be celebrated by millions of people who are dedicated as being fans. They're not one-offs, and it can be so strange. Like the MRE guy, I forget his channel name, but like, think how strange that is, that a person exists who millions of people are tuning in over and over to see eat expired food. And the next one that comes out, the next expired thing he eats, they are there for it already. That's radically different than Rome in Caesar's time, right? So if we start to lose creative skills, if those get softened, if they get dulled, then only a handful of weirdos are going to have exceptional skill because they've very irrationally chosen to pursue it. You've chosen to pursue the guitar despite, having no operational reason that you needed to. There'll be a handful of these people, but you've got to have entertainment. You have to have those events that people want to go to, the things that they want to follow along with. But you're working with skillless people. So you have to create an event that is the draw. Not so much the people, but the event is the draw. Now, this is going to sound insane, but bear with me. Think of something like the Hunger Games, where the event is the Hunger Games. It's not individual skill. That's not it's not like the best people. It is the randomly chosen people from these places. And the appeal of that event is that they basically are in a death match. You can do that with any level of skill. And later on in the books / movies, they do have that kind of all-star class of previous winners. They do ratchet that up. So these are skillful people. But the year after year draw of that has nothing to do with skill. Somebody's got to make the decision on what those events are like. And you can go back to Rome to see what it's like when the skills can't be celebrated, where you do have things like gladiator spectacles, where some of them were very good. Others were just absolutely there to be eaten by, an animal, or be so bad that they were chopped up by somebody else quite easily for the gore factor. There was a lot of skillless stuff back then, but that had to be done because some sort of entertainment had to be put forth. How do you do that when you can't have it all be based on skill that people love? And somebody has to decide that. And it will be the whoever's in charge. That's kind of the way of it. And I think everybody listening has experience in government-run entertainment, because that's how school assemblies are determined. I know. So I'm sure some people went to private school, so it was a little different. But if you went to public school, you went to assemblies that overwhelmingly sucked. They stunk. And so you were not in a position to put up a fight. You were not in a position to influence what those assemblies were going to be. You just had to swallow it and take it. Well, in the broader entertainment sense, you can push back. You can push back. And this is where the bread and circuses came from in Rome. These are incentives so that people would not push back. Entertainment such that they would enjoy it. Well, it's got to be good enough. It's got to be good enough for all these consumers of the entertainment not to be mad about it. And that's got to be something fantastic. There's a reason why Rome is not famous now, why they are famous for gladiator matches that were incredible, and they weren't famous for like chess competitions. There's all sorts of shitty stuff they could have done, and maybe did do, that was sideshowish. But it would have been so boring, it would have sucked, and people would have freaked out completely. So I see the entertainment coming from the skillless to the skillless being really over-the-top stuff. Maybe that's wrong with AI, where it's like, okay, the best entertainment is you just pop on your goggles and say, invent a Tom Cruise movie for me, and it plays you one and you're happy. Maybe you don't need that
Yeah, but
large
that's
scale public entertainment.
I think the differentiation here is that will always be siloed and kind of like masturbatory, for lack of a better word. And human beings will always need some sort of social signal and status signal mechanism. And I think that you're right. I think that the skillless thing, look, these YouTuber boxing events, those are skillless events. These are not actual boxers. Like, do they train for a year? Yes. And I'm sure that the training is very hard.
Some are quite capable. Yeah, some
But
yeah.
but they train for a year and then they get into a boxing ring. Like that's not Malcolm Gladwell isn't writing a book about your 1 year of training before you got paid to do a thing. Like, give me a break.
As much as I like somebody like Nathan Barnett, he's not going to win the Gold Gloves this year in his city's competition. Like,
no.
Like you said, he trained for a year. He certainly threw quite a few good punches. It was cool, but that's very different than somebody who's truly putting all that time into boxing. So yeah, you're right. Relatively, might as well be skillless.
It's skillless, and I don't think it's relatively. I think it's skillless. They're just swinging their arms, and that's okay. Like, I'm not disparaging them. I don't have those skills. But the point is that nobody cares. It's not about that. And I don't even know how many people who would go to that event would even know the difference. Like, how much boxing or MMA do they watch where they see professional strikers? There are people, by the way,
totally different audience.
There are fighters, professional fighters in UFC, like the creme de la creme, who suck at striking, who cannot punch. So, and these are people who, this is their profession. You know, they could be good grapplers or wrestlers or whatever, but they're horrible at punching. I mean, Ben Askren is like a notoriously terrible puncher who, ended up fighting or boxing Jake Paul and losing, of course. But he's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. Literally one of the greatest wrestlers in modern times. Horrible at punching. Like, horrible. It's very hard to be a great striker. It is a skill. It is a talent and a skill that's honed over a very long period of time. So, but again, do people going to Creator Clash care about that? No, it's not about, it's not about that. That's not the point. That's not the point. The point is to just have fun, to get together, have a blast, hang out, and, take some pictures with some other YouTubers who you admire or are friends with and share it online. That's the meat and potatoes. That's the point of showing up to that.
All the stuff you listed about the benefits of going to that in-person event.
And that's what I see more and more happening is, this weird return, ironically, to getting back together because
for such different motivations, though.
Right. Yeah.
That's got to have implications.
Because you get something out of it online.
Yeah.
Doing offline stuff to boost your online stuff.
That's really good, but my theory is that if you don't learn how to cook, you're going to get the Hunger Games. That's it. If you don't learn how to hem your pants, you're going to be fighting for the death in the Hunger Games.
That's all of us. It's
just we're drawing a straight line from A to B on this one.
We're all there. We're all going to be in those games.
Yeah, that's right. Learn to hem, or you will pay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Forget coding. AI will do that.
Right. Learning to code. Oh,
forget that. All right. I think that was everything I wanted to say on this topic, but I'm definitely interested in hearing, feedback from people on it, what they think. And I am trying to get Psychic Pebbles back on the podcast because I want to hear his take on this, since he was really ahead of his time in sort of pointing out the ramifications of this coming down the pike, which has come down the pike.
It has. And we got some really good stories from the Appearance podcast when we asked about that, experiences that people had where that influenced decisions they made, and it was really fascinating. And I really want to know of examples of skills that are going to be dulled or eliminated, and what the implications of that are. Because we talked about a couple of them. We talked about 3 out of probably, I don't know. Do you think there are 50,000 skills in the world? That's got to be just about right.
You can't. We could never know them all or list them all. I thought of one where I was hearing about. So like nails and screws in particular are not old. Like the idea of just having screws to construct things is like kind of a modern thing.
They were hard to produce. Yeah, they were, and just think about what it would take to have a controlled, perfectly machined spiral in that sense. Yeah, screws are very new.
Yeah. So think about, and now we rely on them to construct that basically everything. When
I don't remember the last time I used a nail. I truly don't.
When forever it was nails, and then forever before that it was having the ability to cut wood in
joinery,
joinery and specific, like exacting ways of butting them together so that it was a strong joint without any nails or screws or fasteners of any kind. But no one needs to do that anymore.
Pegs at best. At best, you were using pegs made of wood to join pieces of wood.
Right. Yeah.
And you were using hide glue taken from the animals you slaughtered as an adhesive.
Ooh, that's weird. But I mean,
now you just buy a screw for 8 cents and zoom.
Yeah, zip with your battery powered wireless, amazingly cheap power drill. It just goes zzz, 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 so all of this progression is everywhere, and the really big question is at like what point do we hit the wall? Like at what point?
Yeah.
Because I know the Luddite theory. Believe me, I know the whole story about the Luddites. Okay, that was not that long ago. And at some point, the Luddites might be right. Like just because they were wrong in like 1887 or whenever that was. I don't know what year the Luddites were. But just because they were wrong about that, about sewing machines or whatever they were, that's what it was, right? It was like,
when industrialization came in, it was like, okay, every skilled craftsman of any kind is now just manning a station in a factory and basically making sure that what a machine does is what it's supposed to do. And then the implications of taking work away as well. And that is something that we're fighting now is what do you do with your free time?
Yeah.
We have a shocking amount of it. I know that people don't think they do, and that all they do is work, and in that, capitalism has turned them into, worker bees with no days off. No. You have a shocking amount of free time, and pretty much anything is on the table for what you do with that time. We're going to have even more as things like teens and guitars don't happen. I really would love to find if there are stats on that, on young people specifically playing the guitar and bass. It has to be different now than 25 years ago. But if they're not doing that, then what are they doing? Are they just playing video games? Rick Beato says they're not listening to music, and I believe him. Mm-hmm. So they're doing other stuff. Are they just watching more content? Are they playing video games? I don't know. But something's happening. Something is. And at a point, you have to do the totally irrational thing and decide to do something that you actually don't have to do.
Yeah, you have to make the conscious decision. You have to make the conscious decision. You have to be passionate about it and into it. So I looked up Luddites. It was 1811 to 1816. And it did have to do with, not sewing machines, but like textile machinery, where people would, make these textiles with skilled labor. They knew how to do it, and then they were replaced by machinery that just automated it, which, ask Detroit how that went for automobile manufacturers. Kind of wiped them out. Wiped out like a whole lot of, they have the whole Rust Belt and everything. And that's a really scary thing when it comes to self-driving trucks and stuff like that, where it's like, okay, if eventually the trucks are just driving themselves, and that's no longer a skill. how many
What is your skill?
people
What are you
is
going to do? What are you going to do next?
Yeah, are going to be out of job of doing that. And it's like, how many people are going to be out of this job and that job and that? And it's like, eventually it's like, okay, that was my point. And I never hear anybody bring this up. It's like, yeah, the Luddites were right in 1815. You know, they couldn't foresee the revolutions of the marketplace that were to come, that opened up like entirely new jobs and sectors that they couldn't have ever dreamed of. Okay. Does that happen forever? Does that happen forever? That's a real question. I don't know that happens forever. It has happened for the last 200 years. Yes. It has successfully happened for the last 200 years. Does it happen for the next 200? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I know we've gone a little longer than we wanted to. And this is probably, this is at some point a full episode, okay? Basically on the concept of enemy, because that is something that is deeply, deeply relevant to the people who listen to this podcast. But I will say that labor and tasks and the application of skills and the necessity of acquiring skills is extremely helpful for fitting within the world and knowing who you are in the world and what your place is interfacing with the world. This is a major reason why I am much happier than most people I know. And it is things as stupid as like hauling rocks. That doesn't sound like anything important, and it's actually not, but it's something that I have to do, and I don't have to sit there and think like, who I am, who am I, what's my purpose today? It's like, no, here's a list of shit that I've got to do, and there's a tremendous sense of comfort and peace in that, because I don't have to make all the decisions, you know, it's a bunch of stuff that I do. Well, the less you have to do, the more you have to figure it out, and figuring it out is hard. It is incredibly hard. And that is when you begin to question who you are, what your purpose is, whether you have a place in the world, whether you want to continue being in that world. You can really get in trouble. And the concept for this is called enemy. Durkheim was outstanding with detailing this sense of not quite belonging with the world. And you can think of so many artists who have written music that is good precisely because it's so weird, you know, and it's about their troubles with not fitting. Kevin and I have talked about Kurt Cobain and being one of those guys that just like, he didn't fit with the world, and eventually decided that he'd kind of run his race. But that's the kind of thing that can happen when the tasks go away. You have to find purpose elsewhere, and it's not easy. It is not easy at all. And some people have a harder time than others. That's the thing that I'm worried about, is not so much what the AI or the tech does, but what happens in your mind when you don't have any kind of purpose or a clear role in the world. A lot of people are going to be in very real trouble with this. If you are that 35th percentile writer who's good enough to, pay your rent with it, but not incredible, when that goes away, who are you? You need to figure that out when AI takes that from you, and it's going to be brutal for a lot of people.
Yeah, I see a lot of kind of this return to monk thing being more and more important. This was another example I thought of in sort of this return to monk thing is vinyl records coming back. No one would have predicted that in like 1997. There's no way, but they came back because everything is so intangible. Everything is digital and you can't touch it, that people are now yearning for a physical representation of something like an album that they love. So they would buy this gigantic, fragile, really annoying, frankly, like mechanism medium for listening to music for the sole purpose of kind of making their life harder in order to have a relationship that exists in a physical manifestation with an intangible piece of music. Does that make sense? That's weird.
It yes, as you were describing it, I'm thinking everything he's saying is right, and this is so bizarre. This is really a strange thing. But rethinking all these some mundane little pieces, it's going to be real. It's going to be real, and you had better be clear on who you are and why you are that way. Because if you are, you can roll with all of these changes pretty well. If you're not, a trap door underneath you is about to get opened, and it's a long fall into despair.
Yeah, so you better start hauling some rocks instead, and maybe don't worry about it too much. Like find some sort of boulder to push up some hill somewhere, and
you gotta find something you gotta find meaning in something that is immune to this stuff.
Yeah,
and it can be. This is why a lot of people like pets. Pets give you meaning every single day. And that there's no break from it. Same with kids, but pets are easier to acquire, and you have a little more choice with them. But yeah, I mean, there's meaning in taking care of, a dog or a cat. You wake up and you feed the cat. It was the strangest thing when I woke up. The first few days I woke up and didn't have to feed my cat anymore. My cat wasn't there. I was like, what? My whole morning is different now. Like how I begin my day is completely changed. Oh, that was actually really important. So yeah, there are plenty of things out there, but human relationships being one of them. We talked about how we're worse at starting and cultivating those in person. So some of the things that we need more than ever, we're getting worse at doing. This is complex and generally worrisome. I think it's right to be concerned about how some of these things play out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. All right, I think that's enough for now. We'll put a pin on this, and we'll be back next week. Hope you enjoyed this. If you have any thoughts about this subject, please drop us a line in the Discord or leave a comment on YouTube. We'd love to hear your perspective on it. If you want to support the podcast, please do so at patreon.com/thecreateunknown. We are a patron-supported podcast, so we really appreciate every single one of our patrons for helping keep this podcast going. All right, that's it. We will be back next week. Thanks for all of our patrons for hanging out with us while we record, and we'll see you, Space Cowboys.
Thanks for listening to The Create Unknown. We make this show with the support of our patrons. 100% of that goes directly to keeping episodes going every week, and the recent support has been amazing. Sidpoke, NRM, Venture Addicts, Weezer Good, you all really do make this show happen. Thank you to the Tots and Dumpster crew, old and new, who save tiny little lives every month. Thank you to our grizzled, battle-hardened child infantry. Clemente de los Santos, Dan the Latch, Demetrius Andrews, Erica, Farrakhan, Jen Mefisanti, Kevin Menard, Mikhail Steinke, Monahim, Natsu, Penny Peddler, Risebread, Ryan Kinder, Samuel Manser, Sean S., Sean Malone, and Tom Videoger. And a tremendous shout out to our elite baby gang commanders: Atrocious Guff, Kat, Dojangles, Graham Robertson, James Gallagher, Jeff Davis, Orange Vanilla Coke, Patrick Pister, TCU's personal pilot, Andy, Ryan Carroll, Baseweight, Vinthos, Yeetus Deletus, Jonas Walter, Nathan Robinson, Jelksies, and of course, Trevstead. You are the elite. Thank you as well to our indentured servants, producer-editor Ben Webster, Minecraft mogul Laterman, Discord kitten wrangler Conrad, and producer emeritus Dan Yoshua. Thanks to Baseweight for use of Created in the Unknown for the opening theme. Thanks to Electro Voice for giving us mics to sound good on top of it. And a special thanks to Main Gear for powering all of our PC endeavors. The Create Unknown is an Unknown Media production in partnership with Studio 71.